We need work. We need tourists. We need investors who will bring money into the country, like the old days.
They said we would get more money, a minimum wage. So far, neither the President nor Parliament has done anything.
We don't earn enough and workers' rights are not respected. Egypt has got more chaotic. There are no rules.
Cairo, the Egyptian capital, towards the end of 2012. 20 months have passed since the ousting of former President Hosni Mubarak. We've come here to find out about the challenges facing the country. Two reporters working for Deutsche Welle, Thomas Hazel and Jafar Abdul Karim. This could be a taste of Egypt's economic future. Young men and women with innovative ideas who set up small enterprises in the fields of IT or new media. At the startup centre Flat 6 Labs, the young people get help launching their businesses. Heba El Habashi once had an internet company in the US. Now she wants to pass on her experience.
There's no shortage of ideas in Egypt, but people don't know how to put them into practice, how to set up a business. Here at Flat 6 Labs, we help them to realise their projects. We offer our support and advice throughout the startup phase.
One of the new businesses receiving financial support and expert advice is the internet startup Yadawiya. The 33-year-old Usama Ghazali wants to sell Egyptian handicrafts all over the world online.
The revolution of 2011 is the main reason for the creation of Yadawiya. The revolution encouraged many young Egyptians to pursue their own ideas. I was abroad before the revolution, and I was able to see how young people over there realized their projects. But I never would have thought I'd be able to do the same thing. It's different since the revolution. The people I meet abroad give us the sense that we can change things. That's why my team and I set up Yadawiya.
We accompany Usama to the district of Giza. This is where some of the seamstresses work, whose products he wants to sell through his website.
We're very happy that he's supporting us because we're poor people, and with his help we can earn some money again.
In the past, these women would try to sell their wares to tourists at the Great Pyramids. But the number of tourists has dwindled due to the political instability, and the chance to sell their goods via the internet is a great opportunity.
One important aspect of Yadawiya is that we give people who normally wouldn't stand a chance the opportunity to market their goods. This website gives us the opportunity to put the producers in direct contact with their customers all over the world.
Raising incomes and creating jobs is one of the biggest challenges facing Egypt. Usama Ghazali and his project are a small step in the right direction. We drive out of Cairo and head some 120 kilometers north into the Nile Delta. Our destination is the city of Mahalo al-Kubra, center of the Egyptian textile industry. It's been the scene of protests and strikes since 2004. With us is journalist Mohamed Marai, who comes from Mahalo.
Mahalo played a major role in the outbreak of the revolution last year. There were already nationwide protests planned in April 2008, but Mubarak was able to suppress them everywhere, except in Mahalo. That was a shock for the regime. But it gave the opposition hope that change was possible. We knew that if we were in a position to hold protests throughout the country, as we did in Mahalo, we could overthrow the regime.
It's knocking off time at the biggest textile factory in the city. Since the inauguration of President Mohamed Morsi in June 2012 and the Muslim Brotherhood's increased power, the atmosphere here has been tense. Some still want to give the new government a chance, others have run out of patience.
You Muslim brothers are always claiming that we workers only defend our own interests. But if we hadn't fought for our rights, the revolution would never have happened. Get out of here. Get lost.
Everything is all right for us workers. We have our rights. We will get those rights in return for working, not for going on strike.
I've been working since the 1970s, for 45 years, and someone who's only been here for 10 years is getting a higher wage than I am.
We're not making any demands. We're happy with the way things are. We just want our country to make progress so that the economic situation can improve.
One of the Muslim brothers comes up, and I may have to answer for these words. There are more than 200 of them in the company now, and they're trying to split the workers' movement. They want to destroy the workers' movement that we've been building up since 2006. But they won't, because the people here want no more than to lead a good life, within the law, and as faithful Muslims.
The workers of Mahalo are divided. Their struggle for more rights seems to be overshadowed by party political interests. We were not allowed to film in one of the factories or to look at the working conditions there. But we were granted an interview with Al-Mohammadi Al-Shazli, the press spokesman for the state-owned textile company Nasser.
The workers wanted higher wages, and they got them. So there's no reason to go on strike anymore. Every additional strike in the firm leads to more chaos because there's no justification for further strikes.
The workers' rights activist Wedad Demirdash disagrees. The 45-year-old is one of the driving forces behind the workers' movement in Mahalo. She says there's no end to the struggle in sight.
Today I bought 2 kilos of tomatoes. That's all I could afford because everything has got more expensive. I'd have bought more in the old days, but as you know, wages are very low. After the revolution, we were expecting a government and a president who would recognise that prices are high and that wages have to be adjusted accordingly. They should have established a minimum wage, but not even that would be enough now.
We leave Mahalo with a sense that after decades of oppression, the people here are no longer willing to suffer in silence. We continue our journey through the Nile Delta, where much of the country's arable land is located. Every third Egyptian is employed in the agricultural sector, but few own their own land. Those who do own so little that it's barely enough to live on. Thursday is market day in this village. We meet the 40-year-old Salah Suleiman and his family here. The farmer and his wife sell their own produce here and what's left of the week's crops.
All the farmers here are struggling. The land here is difficult to farm, and the harvest at the end of the year is meagre. Down here in the country, nobody helped us, although we pleaded for help. There is nobody to help us here.
We're short of money, but I want to raise my children properly and offer them a better future. We have to provide our children with food, water, clothes. It all costs money, and children need things every day.
Salah Suleiman invites us back to his house, which he shares with his brother and his family. How much do you earn from your cow every day?
It's not his cow, it belongs to someone else. He can't afford his own cow. It's like this, somebody lent him money and he rented a cow with it. If the cow calves, he shares what she produces with the owner.
My income isn't enough. I don't have my own land and I can't even afford the upkeep on the house.
This family of 13 has to get by on just €4 a day. There's no social safety net, no health insurance, and they produce most of their own food. Salah Suleiman and his brother work a small patch of rented land, planting rice and maize, but the yield is scanty.
I work this patch of land and the owner gets half the crop. But I'm the one doing all the hard work. I'm the one who pays for the seeds and the pesticides, and I carry all the other costs. And what's left is hardly enough to live on. I hope with all my heart that my children will have better lives. I want them to have a better place to live, so that they don't end up like me. I don't want them to have this kind of life. No way.
Back to Cairo. Here, the concerns of Egypt's small farmers seem very far away. And yet, more and more young Egyptians are getting involved in agricultural politics. These little balls of earth contain guaranteed made in Egypt seeds. But this is more than just a joke. It's serious politics, as the environmental activist Noor explains.
The fact is that we import nearly all our seeds, and much of the produce is genetically modified. We're afraid it might have negative effects on our health, but there are no laws in Egypt governing the use of genetically modified crops. So it's important to tell people through our protest actions.
The young activists aren't just worried about safe food. They want Egypt to have a self-sufficient agricultural sector, as it used to.
Egypt relies on seed and food imports, so we're no longer independent. There are problems with the climate all over the world, which affects food prices such as wheat or oats. And that puts us Egyptians in a difficult predicament, because we are the world's biggest wheat importer. This dependence on others is damaging.
But what direction will the Egyptian economy take? What needs to be done to move the country forward? If anyone knows, it's Hazem Bablawi. The 76-year-old economist has written many books and served for 4 months as finance minister in 2011.
We have strong population growth but hardly any resources. So our economic growth must be improved. But we can only do that by producing more in Egypt. So the government must develop a strategy to increase productivity. We must concentrate on sectors with a future, which will still be competitive in 50 years' time. Otherwise, they will lead to stagnation. And we can't do this alone. We need to cooperate with other countries. But above all, we need an economic strategy.
For years, Egypt has been struggling with low productivity and a lack of exports. The annual revenue from exports does not even cover half the imports. To find out more about the government's plans to boost the economy, we went to a conference in an exclusive Cairo hotel where ministers and advisors of the current government were trying to win over foreign investors and lay out their economic plans for the future. Everyone at the conference wanted to know about the new economic policy. Industry Minister Khatem Saleh says the government is making a total break with the past.
The old government concentrated on the big companies, which accounted for 14% of business, but they neglected the small and medium-sized enterprises. That may have led to growth, but the growth was unfairly distributed. The most important thing is to try to improve social justice and spread the economic growth better between the big companies and the small ones.
But the government has a problem. The state coffers are empty and government expenditure too high. That in turn adds to social inequality in the country.
20% of society, the wealthy ones, get 50% of state subsidies. They really should not get any subsidies. Their income is already high enough. They don't need money from the state. These subsidies are a burden on the government because of our large budget deficit. We are facing the challenge of reforming the subsidy system so that only the ones who really need help get it.
At the moment, the government is spending heavily to keep energy prices down. That money is sorely missed elsewhere, in the health and education systems and social projects to help the poor. Barely 5 minutes' drive from Tahrir Square in central Cairo, Egypt seems to have got stuck somewhere between development and industrialization. This is the poor district of Ramlat Bula. In the maze of alleys, we meet Mahrous Abdel Salam. The 62-year-old shows us his home.
Six people live here. My daughter and her children, as well as my own wife and children. You can see what it's like here. But God is with us. What can we do? Apartments are expensive. Up to 1,000 Egyptian pounds a month. I can't afford that. The rent for this place is 20 pounds a month. Soon the wind will destroy the roof. Look at the ceiling. This is where my daughter sleeps, with her children. 3 children sleep here. That's my granddaughter. The electricity doesn't always work. And there's only one tap for the whole neighborhood. What can we do? This is the kitchen, where we prepare food for the whole family. We often have power cuts. We have to buy gas for cooking. And we have to use buckets to fetch the water we need. We eat potatoes and pasta, depending on how much money we have.
I wish we had our own home with nice furniture. Somewhere near here so the family can stick together. I want my children to grow up in better circumstances.
They're still going to nursery school.
Around the corner, we meet Najib and his friends. The 31-year-old tells us he's been out of work since the revolution.
We always suffered in silence. We accepted all the hardships. We don't even have toilets here. Life is not nice in this district. We just want to lead a normal life. They should leave us alone. We elected Morsi as president. It was the poor who elected Morsi, not the business people and the wealthy. But all he's doing is looking after business people instead of us, the people who made him president.
Although Najib wants a better life, he's suspicious of the government's plans to clean up the district because he knows there might be no place for him here when they're finished.
We'll end up like the others. They want to resettle us in the desert, but I want to stay here. I grew up here near the Nile. What am I supposed to do in the desert? I live here.
In the evening, we meet Mohammed Adel of the Egyptian Center for Economic and Social Studies. A lawyer, he represents the interests of the Ramlat Bula residents. He shows us the government's plans for the banks of the Nile.
This is Ramlat Bula, after redevelopment. This is where the slums are at the moment. According to the plans, nothing is going to be left except the two Sawiris towers, while the investors carry out their big construction projects all around them. That's what it looks like at the moment. All the residents here are to be resettled.
The following day, we follow a friend's advice and take a taxi ride. She says taxi drivers are a good way of gauging the general mood among the people in the city.
I'm actually an office clerk, but I drive a taxi after hours because otherwise I wouldn't have enough money to pay the bills. It's worse now than it was under Mubarak. Everything was safer and more stable back then. We were exploited as a people, but we felt safe. There was work, and tourists would come and visit our country. There are protests everywhere now, strikes everywhere. The teachers are on strike, the ministry workers are on strike, strikes everywhere. Just let us work, not sit around. If you're sitting at home and your child needs money, you can't give him any, because you're not working. But if you were working, you could feed your family, right? I wish the traffic would improve. Since Mubarak has gone, the traffic is a disaster. And it's not getting better, it's getting worse. Personally, I'm very worried. But people tell me to be patient, that God will help and everything will get better. And when we recover the money that the old regime smuggled abroad and use it to create work, everything will improve.
Job creation. That is the measure by which any new government will be judged. Because although more and more young Egyptians are attending vocational schools or even universities, only a small minority find appropriate jobs when they graduate. Youth unemployment is running at about 30%. We go to a newly opened job centre. There we meet Mohammed Abul Hussein, who graduated from business school in 2004. Since then, he's been getting by with odd jobs. It's the same story for many young people.
I need a job. I want to work. I want to do something. I'm tired of sitting around at home. I took part in the revolution, and I have a right to work.
Now he's placing his hope in this job centre, the first professional employment agency in Egypt. It was set up by the German development agency, the GIZ.
Every year, the labour market is flooded with about 800,000 young graduates. We need about 1 million jobs each year for young people. On the other hand, and this means that the situation is not totally hopeless, there are about 1.5 million vacancies in Egypt, and that is exactly where this employment center comes in. The task is to make the vacant jobs available to people who are looking for work, both young and old.
The job centre only offers jobs with companies that pay decent wages and provide their workers with insurance cover. For many young Egyptians, a steady job takes some getting used to, so they're sent on training courses to prepare them.
There's a job offer here requiring certain abilities. Any volunteers?
What kind of abilities?
Employers are looking for people who can take responsibility, who are reliable and resilient. Anybody looking for work should meet these criteria.
But Mohammed is not looking for just any job. He wants to preserve the spirit of the revolution of January 2011, because without the young people and their frustration with the Mubarak regime, it never would have happened.
We were oppressed for 30 years. We had to go without a lot, and we were barely given enough to live on. So what are we supposed to do? When you're oppressed for decades, eventually you've just had enough, and you demand your rights. Stop oppressing us. I want to live, just like you. I'm an Egyptian, and I'm demanding no more than my rights. I only got one thing out of the revolution: freedom. There's a lot still missing: social equality and my right as an Egyptian to work.
In the evening, we meet up with Mohammed again in the district of Imbaba. This is where the 31-year-old lives. His friends, like himself, make a living doing odd jobs. Their conversations always return to the same topic.
We've got to work. If you and I had jobs, the country would be in better shape.
There's plenty of work, but the wages are poor.
You've got to believe, otherwise it's never going to get better.
Lots of young people in this neighborhood have trouble finding a decent job, but they still have to make a living. As a tradesman's assistant, like me, as a painter, as a tuk-tuk driver, as a waiter in a cafe, or selling newspapers at the kiosk. That way, you can at least earn enough for the bare essentials, 20 or 30 pounds a day, depending on how it goes. That's why I'd like to have a job that makes it possible to rent an apartment, and maybe get married someday, have children, and a better future.
Shortly afterwards, about 3 kilometers away, we visit one of the many party boats on the banks of the Nile. This is where the children of the upper classes let their hair down. There's no sign of economic hardship here.
Main مشكلة إن في lower class, upper class. Upper class, they don't feel it. Lower class, they do, unfortunately. Yes.
It has no effect on me. There may be a crisis, but not for me.
Why?
Because I've got money.
Us foreigners working here, we do care. We do want to do something about it, but we've been so cut off from the whole Egyptian economical crisis that we don't even know what's happening anymore. All we do is like just hang out and have parties like this. try to avoid confrontations.
Mohammed Hani is not here to party. He studied business marketing, but he gets by as a freelance photographer. He specializes in taking photographs at the rich young people's parties.
I'm working as a photographer just to make a living. I'm 25 years old and I have to earn my own keep. But I look for a different job every day. I have to find something in the field I studied in before I forget everything I've learned. If I had the chance, I would leave this country immediately.
Leave the country? Where does this frustration come from? There are millions of young people full of creative ideas in Egypt. They are the future of the country, and they are the ones who could move the economy forward. But that is exactly what the old regime prevented for decades. Has the revolution changed any of that? There is still one old legacy of the past that threatens to stifle energy and progress, the infamous state bureaucracy. With some 6 million civil servants for 80 million inhabitants, it's one of the most bloated in the world. The economist Amira El-Haddad of the American University in Cairo says this is one of the main reasons for the country's crisis.
Egypt has a bureaucracy that is both excessive and inefficient. Excessive that the Egyptian government has, throughout its history, been obsessed with command and control. They believe bureaucracies work only through a very controlled environment. And this is coming from the fact that in most our bureaucracies, you find the army heading the bureaucratic institutions. We want to have a strong economy that is rid of these petty and pathetic controls that only harm us from progressing.
One of the side effects of this massive civil service is corruption. In order to get Egypt's often poorly paid civil servants to give them what they want, Egyptians often have to resort to bribes or connections. We agreed to meet the editor-in-chief of the Egyptian daily Shuruk. He has been investigating corruption in Egypt for years.
Corruption was an important factor in the revolution of 2011. It's also partly to blame for the ruination of the state finances. For example, in order to make sure the civil service remained loyal to it, the old regime gave the relatives of civil servants jobs too. Just before an election, it would hire lots of people, even though there was no need for them. That's why we have 6 million civil servants now, and they all have to be paid out of the budget. But these people have very little to do and are of no use to their country. I'll give you another important example of corruption. We have no law governing how people combine political office with business interests. Even today, we still don't have one. A politician can be a minister and a businessman or a company owner at the same time. How do we guarantee that his company does not get preferential treatment?
The cure for corruption and nepotism is the same the world over: transparency and democratic oversight of all state organs, be they ministries, governments or the security apparatus. And that takes us to a state institution that has so far avoided all democratic supervision: the Egyptian military. Although it may have largely disappeared from the political stage, it still plays a major role in the country's economy. And it makes products that have very little to do with national defence. For example, fridges, TV sets, pasta, olive oil and insect repellent. We meet the economist Reda Issa, who takes a sceptical view of the military's economic influence.
The military can make products such as pasta or these coconut flakes much cheaper than a private sector company. It's often claimed that we want to promote a free market economy here in Egypt. But while a normal company has to pay its staff and pay its taxes to manufacture products, such as olive oil or insect repellent, the army just deploys its troops as cheap labor and pays no taxes. That puts other companies at a huge competitive disadvantage.
But the military doesn't just make civilian products. It also owns factories and businesses. And many officers get a golden handshake when they leave service, as the journalist Wael Gamal explains.
The military still plays an important economic role, and that can also lead to corruption. Many high-ranking officers set up companies when they retire and use their contacts to do so. Naturally, that's also something that has to be supervised. It's the same story when high-ranking officers leave service and take on a government job.
We have the impression that the outlook for Egypt's economy is mixed, but we are convinced of one thing. The country's greatest resource is its youth. And it is just this resource that Mireille Nashat and her colleague want to promote with their organization Injaz. They regularly visit schools and universities around the country to encourage young people to start their own businesses. The girls are not short on career ideas.
Pediatrician.
Sports teacher.
Chemist.
Interior architect.
Respected professions. But what if the Egyptian economy needs other skills?
We're trying to bridge the gap between the education system and the labour market. As we've seen, many young girls want careers in medicine or architecture. None of them has thought about what she's going to do if that does not work out. But if you think about it, setting up a new company and taking responsibility and creating jobs can be a big help to the Egyptian economy.
And how about taking responsibility for the whole of Egypt? Which one of you wants to be the next president of Egypt?
No way. No, no way. But maybe she'd like to.
I see that many Egyptians want to achieve a lot, but the president does not see it because he's not close enough to them. If I were president of Egypt, I would be close to the people and go and visit them where they live and work. I would refurbish the schools because a good education is important. There are teachers in other schools, of course, not here. There are teachers who give smart kids preferential treatment, but I think all people are smart. You just have to look after all of them instead of a couple of favourites. Because if nobody looks after you, you will never achieve anything.
So where is Egypt headed? Can the people build a better future after decades of economic mismanagement? Has the revolution of 2011 done them any good at all?
After the revolution, the Egyptian people assumed one special characteristic. Although they did make many small mistakes, those are outweighed by what's positive. The people of Egypt feel that they own their own country again. The people have the feeling that their country finally belongs to them, and they will not be giving it up again. In the old days, nobody cared. Things are different now, and that is a big plus.
The Egyptians are proud of their history and culture, which date back thousands of years. Most of them are also proud of the revolution, And although the legacy of the Mubarak era weighs heavily on the country, they all dream of a better future. The tourists from all over the world who are gradually beginning to return will play their part.
Before the revolution, this place was full of tourists. I'm afraid their numbers have fallen since then.
The tourism industry collapsed as a result of the revolution, but it's gradually recovering because security has returned.
Egypt is the mother of all countries, you know, and it's a safe place. I want the whole world to know that.
Our journey across Egypt ends on the banks of the Nile, for so long the country's lifeline. The river still provides a living to many poor fishermen, although the work is hard and the money poor. Walid Abdu is one of them. He goes fishing on the Nile 7 days a week with his nephew and his son. When we meet him, he is about to set out on another fishing trip. But first, he tells us of his dreams for the future.
I want to find a proper job so that I no longer have to live on the river. I want my son Abdu to be able to go to school and graduate so that he will have a better life than I. And I would like a fair and happy Egypt, in which all Egyptians can live in harmony.